I don't know if you were here for the congressman's interview first thing this morning, Congressman Hurd, but he said the government, when it comes to cybersecurity, is never going to compete with the private sector. How hard do you find it to persuade students to resist the allure of Silicon Valley, working on a startup, and instead really, join the cybersecurity workforce? Talk to us about how difficult that is, and what are universities like yours doing to help students really understand the value and the importance of this field?
Sure. I think from my perspective, students will enter the field somewhere. They're not going to spend this amount of time and money and heading in a career path if they're not interested. So, I turn to my government colleagues and I'll say, you have to find a new model of incentivizing these young people to come to you. You're always going to get those people who believe in God and country who are going to go to work for the government because they want to. But inevitably, you're going to get a whole swath of students out there who are going to look to the private sector. So the two things have to occur. Either the government has to start with those connections to our private sector colleagues, or they're going to have to incentivize young people to come to them. And the promotion based on time served model may have worked in the past, but not in today's young consumer.
Does the government need to loosen up a little bit, shall we say? Steve earlier this morning was describing, the young student with a couple of piercings and, in his sloppy T-shirt, sleeping in, maybe who's got a few traffic tickets or other, brushes with the law. And so when it comes to cybersecurity, so often, certainly in the federal government, no, need not apply.
Right. I think, the Secret Service had this very issue with marijuana, where they've actually changed it now. It's not use, but it's experiment. If you experimented, we'll live with that. So I think we have to move. I think there's obviously security concerns are imperative, and there's a large difference between getting a motor vehicle violation as opposed to a substantial drug or some other type of felonious crime. So I think, government, I think you have to be cognizant of today's young people, and they're viewing the world differently. But ultimately, security and making sure you're bringing in someone that can receive a security clearance and is not going to be a threat is the important element.
Mike, is part of the problem that enough young people just aren't coming out of high school and looking at college and being interested in a STEM career? How challenging is it today to get young people excited about careers in cybersecurity? How do you inspire in them the same passion that you have about the field?
So at the University of Maryland, actually it's not a challenge at all. We have the largest computer science undergraduate program in the country. We have about 3,100 undergrads in CS, so the entire College Park campus is about 28,000 students, so we're a huge part of the entire university. And many of those students end up working for companies or working for the government doing security work. So I think that the interest in technology, the interest in science is there, and students want to be a part of the vanguard of making and reshaping our society to use technology more, and many of them are very intrigued and interested in security as well.
So you don't find any challenge at all?
We find the challenge in keeping up with all of the students that we have. It's quite a challenge to keep them interested, keep them trained, get them to come to College Park and pursue their degrees here at our modest state institution rather than go off to some fancy place somewhere else. And I think we're doing a pretty great job.
Well, speaking of the students, we have two here in Bronx. Thank you for joining us. DC traffic is the worst, is it not?
Yeah, Metro was backed up and everything too, but I was able to make it.
So when it comes to cybersecurity, you're both pursuing cybersecurity degrees. There are some who say, as we look down the road, if there ever is a World War III, that it will be a cyber war. Would you say that, is that intimidating or is that exciting to you to know that you might someday be, a warrior, a cyber warrior on the front lines?
Well, it's both. It's both exciting because, you're not just sitting behind a computer doing something that has no meaning. It actually has meaning to it. And there's really an effect to it, like the Ukrainian power grid attack. That's an excellent example of something that was cyber-based that had a real, tangible effect on people's, I think it was hundreds of thousands of people's lives that just lost the power like that. And, you've got other things like what was it? Georgia.
Georgian attack.
Yeah, there was that. I'm just trying. It was OPM. That's what I'm trying to remember. And
Was that what inspired you to get into cybersecurity? Did I read that?
that's part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just you see all these attacks going on, especially with OPM. It's this organization you expect that has security in place, and it's like, how did that happen? How did you lose track of all that data, especially when it's such sensitive data, background checks, stuff like that. And that's just exciting to me because I want to be able to help protect that data, and it seems almost like a challenge. You have all these adversaries, be it cyber criminals or even state actors, and they really want to get a hold of that. And to sort of have that challenge is just it's something that excites me.
Bronx?
Yeah, so for me, on the defense side, so that would be something which I would be feeling like, okay, coming out of high school, joining the military was something I had considered. So if I could do something in which, I'm defending systems on the cyber side of things, as far as with the cyber war in North Korea and preventing, nuclear winter and everything, that would be something I would be interested in doing. I know recently, a couple of years back, the Israeli and United States, they coordinated together in an effort to decentralize or diffuse some of Iran's centrifuges with the Stuxnet virus and everything. And everyone's, doing it, trying to get into everybody's things. Like recently, Kaspersky, they were caught by the Israelis spying on the U.S., in which the U.S. was spying on, everybody else, basically. But yeah, that's...
So you see this as another way of protecting and serving your country.
To me. Mm-hmm.
Scott and Mike, technology, as we all know, is constantly evolving. I mean, it seems like as soon as you get a new device, within 5 or 6 months, a better one has come out with vastly improved features. In the classroom, when you're teaching cybersecurity, how do you make sure that what you're teaching also doesn't quickly become obsolete?
Well, I'm fortunate in that, I could say I'm fortunate. The college I'm in, the College of Professional Studies, the great majority of the academics are industry professionals. So I have the advantage of being able to go out and get people that are currently working directly in that field. I may only bring them in for 1 semester of teaching, but I have that advantage of going out and grabbing people that are working right now today in that area. So they often are able to bring into the classroom exactly what they were doing that day, and use that as the basis of their lecture. So that's a real benefit to my program at GW.
Mike?
I would say that the challenge that we as university professors face all the time is being able to teach useful skills, but also to teach students how to think, how to take those skills and generalize them and adapt them. Things that I learned when I was an undergraduate, many of them still have value today, but many of the details are different. So especially in a computer science curriculum like the one that we have, it's important for students to understand that when they build software, their software is on the front lines. It is, as an example, the WannaCry ransomware attack was due to a software vulnerability that was exploited. The most recent Equifax breach was due, once again, to a software vulnerability that was exploited and much data was stolen. And so even if you aren't thinking that you're a cybersecurity person, if you're writing software, you are. And so we need to provide general reusable skills to help them think about, okay, I can't trust all of the input I'm receiving. I can't trust all of the data that's coming in. I can't trust the network my data is going across. Given that reality, how do I write my systems? How do I build my code? How do I configure things properly? And those lessons of approaching a system, thinking about its threats, thinking about how to build it to diffuse those threats are general lessons that can evolve as the technology evolves. At least that's the message we try to put across.
How are you addressing quantum computing?
We were just talking about that. So quantum computing is interesting. I guess you're referring to the fact that cryptography can potentially be broken more easily with a quantum computer than with a so-called classical computer. So at Maryland, we have a pretty sophisticated quantum computing research center that is in partnership with NIST. It's one of the best centers. It's called JQI, Joint Quantum Institute. It's one of the best in the country. And so people are thinking about exactly that problem of what is the landscape of future, not just quantum computation, but quantum cryptography, quantum communication, and how can we both exploit those capabilities for our advantage while also defend against them. So I would say it's very much cutting edge research to be thinking about these questions.
Scott?
No, I concur. You know, the interesting thing about the field, though, which I enjoy, is the fact that it's so multidisciplinary. My colleague is in a CS. My program is adaptive technology. So, and then there's our friends in computer engineering as well. So when you look at the vastness of the discipline, it can bring in so many different people. Myself, I was saying earlier, I don't hold a degree in any technology. I'm a clinical criminologist. I do human factor analysis of how people behave on computers and who are adversaries and deconstructing them. So one of the great joys that we have in this industry is that we can bring in a vast array of different professionals adding to this, collectively, to this discipline. So as I say, my students are probably looking at the adaptive nature of it. How do we take existing technologies today and adapt them to the real world problems that we're facing? And that's one of the skill sets that my students get, is being able to analyze the environment and then be able to apply a strategy, especially in business, where we're moving constantly at breakneck speed around the world. How do we get our sales forces, how do we get our inventory control done globally with the existing technologies we have, whilst making it safe and secure?
Cameron and Ronks, would you talk to us about your classes that you're taking right now? Do you think they're hands-on enough? Do you feel like they're really preparing you for the cyber battlefield of the future? Cameron, I saw you nodding when I was asking about quantum computing. Are you working on that already?
I'm not working on it. I don't understand it at all, but I love it.
All right, you got a few years to get up to speed, but not much time.
But it's really interesting. I mean, how like entangled particles, how you can observe them, and then regardless of distance, it will instantly become that state when you observe it. You can't really transfer information, I hear, but it's still really interesting to me, especially the impact for quantum computing with encryption. One of the major backbones of encryption these days is using primes, and calculating primes is not easy with conventional computing. But with quantum computing, it completely approaches the problem differently, so it's much easier to calculate primes, and that has a negative impact on encryption. But that sort of technology is really, I look forward to that. I want to do that later on. I want to take these up-and-coming technologies like quantum computing and artificial intelligence and figure out how to apply that to like a security field. Because, I mean, could you imagine an artificial intelligence that can design some sort of cybersecurity implementation I love it.
Ronks?
And with me, as far as the cybersecurity things that I see involving as far as the cloud computing, cryptocurrency, like yesterday I was at a meetup with like some of the co-founders of IOTA there in Crystal City, so they got to speak about how they started their nonprofit, and kind of want to get my foot in the door and learn a little bit more about this cryptocurrency and how it works and the whole schema of it and everything. And so right now I'm actually taking a network computer attack and hacking class, so that class I'm hoping it's a little bit more hands-on, so I'm preparing for some cyber competitions that my school is going through, so like National Cyber League, and then they're going to have tryouts for CCDC and I believe the Cyber Fusion down in Lexington at VMI. So those are like some of the things I'm looking forward to.
Mike, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about a new program, or at least a new class you have underway at the University of Maryland that's trying a new way to help students get a better foundational understanding of how to code.
So actually, I would like to make a plug for an article in the New Atlantic by James Somers. I was reading it on the way here. It's called The Coming Software Apocalypse. If there's anything you take away from what I say today, it's go read this article, because it very effectively describes how much of a challenge we face because of the growing complexity of software, and because of, as a result, the myriad of vulnerabilities that can be part of that software. So being able to teach students to be computer scientists, to be software engineers effectively, means that we need to help them really understand the fundamentals of how software works and how to build it appropriately. And we're looking at a way of using a new teaching language. It's called How to Design Programs is the name of the methodology. It's been piloted at other universities. And in order to bring in the sort of non-traditional student and to make the more traditional student the sort of geeky white guy stereotype that you might know about, to put them a little bit off their game and to force them to think a little bit differently. I think this program is really great for that. So far we have a much higher population of women in this program. We have more underrepresented groups in the program, and at least initial surveys are showing that people are feeling more comfortable in the way that we're teaching things. They feel less like an outsider. So we'll see. Within a year or two, we'll have more data to evaluate it.
Well, it's time for questions. So we've got a lot. Let's go for a mic runner. Whoever's closest, you pick a hand there.
Thank you very much. My name's Laura Bate. I'm working on cybersecurity workforce development at New America. And one of the trends that we have often seen is that relative to the need of employment in cybersecurity, there are relatively few entry-level positions. It seems like the alignment between a lot of the programs and a lot of the hiring managers just isn't set up correctly. So my question is, in your programs, what do you experience that really sets students up to get through that first 2 years, 5 years of work experience that so many job postings are calling for?
Take that.
Well, for example, I was just speaking to a firm the other day, and I brought one of the representatives into the class about security clearances. So one of the issues we're dealing with in this particular part of the country is whether you're working for the government or one of the many, many government contractors, security clearances are required. And most private sector companies will not spend the money up front for younger people. They would rather invest it in us. And we have to break away from that. I think this gentleman was with a human resources group in the company, and he was finally able to get to his management group and say, I needed a disposable amount of money to take young people and get them security rated if we're going to bring them in. So the biggest concern I see in cybersecurity is getting the young people security clearances to work in these fields. They're being excluded, and yet then we go poaching into things like the military. Where people come in the military, they come up for their next re-up, and they're saying, no, I'm leaving and going into the private sector. So we're all poaching from the same pool right now, and I think we need private industry needs to look at an investment of a security clearance into a younger person and say, it's worth rolling the dice.
All right, next question. Maybe on this side of the room. Let's move over here.
Hi, I'm Tony Fowler. I work at the U.S. Department of Education. And in my experience and observation, I can tell you that there are a lot of kids that are not college age that have skills for cyber. I had the opportunity of meeting the National Cyber Patriot team, the national winners of the Cyber Patriot competition, and we're sitting around the table, and I'm like, what's next? Can you get a job? Well, it's against the law for us to get a job. So I think that what I would suggest is that there is a glass floor and related to age when it comes to the cyber community. And I would suggest that there are other technical industries where there are kids who have skills that can be acknowledged and recognized, and have kids that are hired that are 17 years old, for instance. But they're not being hired, they're not even being acknowledged, and of course, in some states it's against the law for them to get a professional job at that age. So,
how young is too young?
So I guess I'd like to think about the question differently, which is stepping back, if you had a lot of cars that didn't work very well, would you say we need to create many more jobs for auto mechanics? Or would you say we need to figure out how to build cars better so that they work better and we need less mechanics as a result? I would say that a lot of focus now on cybersecurity and cybersecurity hiring is more on here's a system that was built terribly, let's figure out how to put duct tape on it and put walls in front of it and hope everything doesn't fall down anymore. And instead we need to be focusing on rethinking the way we build our infrastructure so that it's more sound to begin with, And I would suggest that you need to be thinking bigger picture, broader, fundamentals, more. That's a place where college education, I think, is really valuable, and you want to hire people out of college in that case.
Scott, did you want to add to that?
You know, I agree. And, you know, we have to look at a lot of the jobs that are still also available for younger people are those kind of cubicle jobs where we've got a certain amount of computer work involved to their stage, and then there's a human dynamic that comes in. You know, you're a packet filter person. So this packet filter is coming through and it's stopping at you, and you are the human face, and you're doing some menial task with that very quickly to send that packet through to the next level. There's a lot of that type of employment, and that's not going to be attractive to young people
No one's going
investing
to do
time.
that for very long.
They're not.
Right?
But it's a huge
I have
part
a
of the
nephew
industry.
working at Fort Meade in
Right.
cybersecurity. He can't tell me what he does, or you'd have to kill me. But I think he's actually doing very little right now. And he's been there, you know, he's approaching a year, and I don't think he's been really given anything to do. I have a friend in the intelligence world who says, well, that's what you do for the first couple of years. You take out the garbage. And that doesn't appeal.
I was an officer in the military, so I had an enlisted person take
Canada,
out the rubbish.
right?
But you're right. But even as a young second lieutenant, there was coffee to be made. Yes.
Well, I hate to tell you, we are out of time. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you all so much, Scott, Mike, Cameron, and Ronks.
Thank you.
Next panel. Thank you.